I did something. Oh, I think I'm recording us.
5 minutes past 7, so we're going to call the meeting to order. I have Mr. Foreman, Horton, clerk, call the roll for the Board of Finance. Absolutely. Yeah. Mike Doherty, present. Roy Broderick is excused. Ron Cabana, here. Dave R. is here. Glenn Lessig, here. Jeff Keller, here. Reggie Moore, here. Mike Bernardi, here. And I'm David Ford, and I'm mostly here. Do you want me to call out the other boards?
I'll just recognize for the Board of Selectmen that Selectman Frank Ola is here, myself as first Selectman, I'm here of course. Selectman Champaquette gives his regrets. He was supposed to be here tonight, but unfortunately he and his family are at Norwich Baptist Hospital right now, so if people could keep their thoughts for his family in mind, that would be great.
Board of Ed, you want me
I
to
can
call?
just recognize the members who are here. So Megan Bard Morris, Chairman of the Board of Ed, as well as Hans Frank Hauser, Vice Chair, Joan Fortin, Secretary, Cindy Alberts, Member,
Thank you.
as well as Janice
Yes,
Carlo, our Business Manager, and Victor Told, our Superintendent.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Before we get into our agenda here any deeper, we have a guest with us this evening who I invited. Thought maybe he could give us some input on where the state is. Our newly re-elected state representative, Pat Boyd.
Thank you. Yeah, this is good that a couple of the towns I work with have tri-boards on a regular basis to start stuff off, and I've tried to come to the open forums in the past that the Board of Ed has had. January 9th, the new session starts up with the new legislature and the new governor, and the budget process goes through. It's a long session this year, which ends the second week of June to have it all in closure. A lot of the things that came up before were very administration specific with a new governor and a new administration. It's really unclear at this point what his priorities are going to be, particularly with funding. He hasn't named an OPM director yet. There's a mixed bag going on right now. The 2019 fiscal year is ending with about a $200 million surplus, which is positive because at least in the first 2 years that I've been up there, we've had to do a deficit mitigation plan each year because there have been significant shortfalls. So that's the positive piece, is that there's an ending in a surplus status. The downside is the new biennium in 2020 has got a $1.9 billion deficit, and then the following year, 2021, has got another $1.9 to $2 billion deficit in there. So you're looking over a 2-year period about $4 billion, and largely because of the unfunded pension liabilities that have built themselves up. There's a number of things that are out there that 2 years ago there was no discussion on. 2 years ago there was about a $2 million rainy day fund, which is probably statistically less than 1% of the overall operating budget. Because of receipts and a new volatility cap, there's probably around $2 billion in the rainy day fund, which is significant. And probably and Mike might know better than I, probably the largest rainy day fund in recent time in particular. Now there's obviously going to be the temptation from a number of people to spend that money on other things, but at least the early indication from the governor-elect is that maybe if any of that comes out, it needs to go to pay down the pension fund, not to any subsidizing of operating at this point. Without lack of any direction or details on what his budget's going to be, he's going to present his budget to the joint session of the legislature about the first week of February, and that really does begin the discussion part as to where the legislature is going to go with it, where that piece is. All I can say, and I'm sure you all agree with me, is we cannot have what happened 2 years ago where this dragged out until Halloween to the process. So Just like in the last cycle, you know, as I know information, even if it's not complete, I try to pass it on to the first selectman and the superintendent, so you guys have at least what I'm seeing and working with, and to try to give you the resources that you have as stuff comes along. And you know, if any of your boards need help getting information or looking for stuff from either you know, fiscal analysis in the legislature or OPM, you know, myself and Senator-elect Champagne, who is a municipal leader himself, so he understands the work that you're trying to do. We'll do our best to try to push that information along. So I don't have a lot for you now, but you know, hopefully as the year turns and things become clearer, you know, municipal funding will not be something that becomes a football like it was before. And you know, any advocacy that you're able to do as well does help, you know, our positioning, because as much as, you know, we're talking about our challenges, the larger urban delegations are already lined up with their hands out, looking for funding for different things or increased funding or even new programs. And we're a while away from stabilizing our finances in the state. So that's a quick snapshot. If there's anything I can do to help you through your process over the next year, I'll keep communication up, but please don't hesitate to reach out. So.
Actually, Pat, just a
Sure.
quick question. Steep grant requests.
Yes.
Now, I know that those were off the table really for the past 2
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
When you get a sense of what the possibilities may be there, you could let us know,
Yeah.
because we do have a number of them that have been awarded. And there's pros and cons, particularly with bridge work, for us
Sure.
tapping into that. So it may be something we may not want to pursue, but there were steep grant requests, particularly for the transfer station, that we were hoping to use to make some improvements. So.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that the governor, to his credit, did put out a number of feelers for things that are important. And one of the things is steep grants have not been on the table in recent time, and if they would begin, and obviously TARP money and you know, local capital improvement, all that stuff that's really important that may not seem important on the giant balance sheet when you're in the governor's office. Any other questions or anything at this point? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Are there any comments from the audience at this time? Okay. If not, we will open our discussion. Basically what it is we're looking to get everybody's input as to what your major concerns are for the upcoming budget year. We're not talking dollar figures here, but if we've got something that's going to be a major change somewhere along the budget line, something that wasn't in the budget in the past or whatever, that we should know ahead of time that'll be coming up. But basically, so everybody gets an understanding of where everybody else is coming out of the gate from here, what we're working with going down the road. Because come probably mid-January or February, we'll have some idea as to what we can actually spend, and at that time, it's going to be critical as to how it affects your budgets. So that being said, I will turn this over at this time to Board of Ed. Megan, would you like to speak first?
Thank you very much for organizing this. I know we had some.
Excuse me, Megan. Could I ask everybody to speak up for those that might be hearing impaired? Please.
Mike, thank you very much for organizing this. I know we had something similar to this a few years back at the town hall. I realize there's something going on there right now, but welcome to the middle school cafeteria.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. Like you had mentioned, we don't have real solid numbers for you, but of course we do have some things that we're tracking. We have a couple things that will certainly affect our budget that has been brought to our attention. Primarily, it is in the realm of high school tuition. Of course, there's health insurance. And then we had a couple of questions for you that some things we may have, previous boards have tossed around as far as potential revenue for the Board of Ed, but just to get more of a definitive answer on where that might fall. I do want to turn it over to Victor and Janice, who can give you more of a, I guess, more information or more of an informative update when it comes to some information.
Thank you. And
Victor?
Like Megan said, welcome to the cafeteria. It's a lovely place.
Again, thank you.
Hope your feet don't stick to the floor.
Don't say
They watched it, they did a good job.
Brian does a great job. I'd like to introduce Janice Thurlow. We are very fortunate to have her in Woodstock. She comes to us from Canterbury, where she was the business manager for
11 years.
11 years. She's taking a look at everything with a fresh set of eyes. It's been really refreshing. She asks a lot of questions. She has a lot of insight. So I think we as a school district and as a town are very fortunate to have her. And I feel bad for Canterbury, but I'm happy for Woodstock. So Megan had mentioned some of the things that we're anticipating coming up for the upcoming budget season. One of the items I wanted to bring to your attention was at our last Sending Town Superintendent meeting, the headmaster at the academy, Chris Sanford, indicated that there is the possibility of there being a additional charge in the tuition for capital projects that they're anticipating, roofs, oil tanks. And the number that was kind of thrown around to the superintendents was around $500. So some kind of additional capital surcharge.
Per student.
Per student. So that's something, that we knew that they had projects that they needed to know, but we didn't have anything solid or definitive. So I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen. That's something that is kind of unanticipated that we'll have to deal with. And then in addition to that, there will be a tuition increase as well. So the capital surcharge will be in addition to a tuition increase, which is not definitive yet, but it could be somewhere in that same ballpark. So that could be significant impact to the overall budget. The other area that we anticipate increasing would be health insurance. As you know, that we are with the state partnership plan this year, and Janice, they're talking anywhere between 5 and 8%.
8 and 10%.
8 and 10% increase. So the question there would be, with that health insurance increase, is that something that we could possibly use the health insurance reserve fund, for which we have a policy, as a way of mitigating that tax increase for the taxpayers? Again, that's something just wanted to throw out on the table there as a possible way to reduce any impact to the town. Those are two major areas that we're looking at the Board of Education side, and then of course you have your negotiated increases for salaries, contracts, which right now for teachers we're estimating would be around $185,000. So those are basically the three biggest challenges that we're looking at right now for the budget.
Any questions about that before we?
I don't. David, go ahead.
Yeah, this Woodstock Academy additional capital surcharge, where does that come out of? We have a contract with the academy,
Yes.
Yes, we have.
and somewhere in that contract is language that allows them to suddenly give us an additional charge on top of our tuition.
Well, they're in the preliminary discussion of throwing that out there. So, yes, I mean, it's not just Woodstock, it's all the other sending towns too that heard the same information. So we're passing it along to you, but definitely not going to just take this lightly.
That's where I'm coming from here.
Right.
Is there any chances we can push back against that, or is there contract language that absolutely allows that at any point?
Right. We'll have to look into that further, but we just thought we'd put it out there because that is like, it's a major, like we come to you for a roof repair, it has to go through a whole capital process. And what they're catching this as a capital fund, would it not have to go through the same process in all of the sending towns, if that's what the term they're calling it to be? So,
As far as our contract, I don't have it in front of me, but I don't remember there being something explicitly in there regarding capital improvements at the academy as far as an additional charge. But I'd have to actually go through it again, but I don't remember there being one in there.
but there might
So-
not be anything.
But there might not be anything that precludes it.
Right.
Right, so the posture, alluding that
just-
they're gonna
They're
request.
looking at it.
Right, correct.
But that's the double arm, right?
What was the feeling of all your superintendents?
Well, our discussion was, it would have the greatest impact, of course, on Woodstock.
All the other towns.
But they would, yeah, of course, they felt it too. Our discussion was, should it be lumped in with the tuition or should it be separate? And our concern was if it was lumped in and say a year or two from now it was taken off and that would affect your MBR, your maintenance of effort and all those kinds of things. So the superintendents that were at that meeting, we indicated that we prefer it to be two separate items so that we could present it as two different things to our boards in our towns.
You know, if that fee is affected by the purchase of the low payments that they have for this new South Campus.
I believe some of the repairs, roofs, and tanks are on the south campus.
If I understood you right, this is over a 7% increase.
Yes.
Because they've had in the past, being in Canterbury, I've seen the tuition increases for Woodstock Academy. And recent years, they haven't had a 3.5%. They're talking about a $500 regular tuition. It's been a while since they've had that much of an increase, but they have had that significant increase in the past.
It's been, it's been 10 years anyway, something like that. But my point is whether you put it in one bucket or two buckets, it's 7%. 7% is a big number. And I think 7% gets a little bit, has a little bit more of an impact than $500. When you look at these things, we start talking about 7% increases in something in today's environment. That's a big number. That's a really big number.
And
Wherever they decide they're going to put it.
And they're not solid numbers right now. So they're not solid numbers right now. So,
Exactly. So now is the time to get the point across that 7% increase is a big number in anything.
Is there actually a plan that the academy has that they never discussed with you to say, not just roofs? Are they saying the dorm roof here, dorm A, dorm B? What are we talking about in terms of what they're trying to get done?
They actually do have a plan, and there's several routes on several different buildings, and they're trying to go through different aspects and trying to justify or offset the costs, ranging from solar panels to all different things. So the numbers that is being thrown around are definitely soft, because they're still trying to formulate a plan. There's 3 different plans that I was aware of when I was part of the executive meeting last, and they were throwing around the idea of solar panels. So until that gets approved by the trustees, there's no set number on how much it's going to cost for any of the roof repairs on the building.
No engineering.
Any idea how imminent these repairs are that they're talking about?
Well, some of them were supposed to be probably started, 2 years ago, as far as a plan, but they've been put off here and there for budgetary reasons also. So it's not necessarily the South Campus, it's the North Campus as well.
there's a concern to try to get some of it accomplished and starting this summer, particularly when it comes to the oil tanks.
Yes.
But as far as a solid plan for Hans and Victor, have had more conversation about it.
Excuse me for just 1 second. second. Terry, would it be helpful if people identified themselves by their last name? So you and I don't have to try to unravel this in about 6 days? Since that was Mr. Frankenhauser who was talking about the different projects.
Yeah.
You know, Mrs. Bard Morse by now, I think. You know who she
Yeah.
is, right? You know Victor you're sitting next to. And I'd like you to just put your hand up or shout out if you need something, okay? Otherwise, you and I are going to try to recreate this from memory. It's be terrible.
I just want to make sure you know Frank Ola. I asked him those questions. I just want to make sure.
And I'm Mr. Lustig. Has there been a change in the number of representatives that are on the Board of Trustees from the sending towns? Can you give us a little bit of background on that, if there has been?
The corporators of the academy voted a couple months ago to change how their academy is governed. They looked closely at how things were structured as far as how many trustees are on the board. They are trying to increase their sending town representatives, and as it was previously structured, they wouldn't be able to offer sending town representation to all the towns and communities that we're hoping to attract. As explained to me, for those reasons, the sending town representation was approved to a maximum of 1. So that Woodstock Hans is our sending town rep. I know he has been trying to do double time up there as far as attending finance, executive, and regular board of trustees meetings where we had previously had 2. I believe their sending town representation still makes up the bulk of the executive committee at the board of trustees. But right now, I believe there are fewer sending town reps than there have been previously because the other towns don't have the representation yet.
So on the executive committee, there's 10 members, 12 members, or members?
I believe there's 8 members. There are still slots open for whoever's going to come in for as a sending member. So I think Canterbury is still talking about sending a rep to the Board of Trustees, then they'll have a seat on the executive committee. They don't have it set up. It used to be, one person had the executive committee seat, the other person had the finance committee seat. But now that we have one, I actually requested to sit on both. I haven't gotten word back about the finance committee, but I'm going to some of the meetings, I guess, some of the same information I get on the executive committee. So basically all the workings happens in the executive committee, and the decisions that get made there are the ones that usually get presented to the trustees, the board of trustees, which is usually 2 weeks after the executive committee.
So the sending towns, no matter how many students we're sending, they all get 1.
Yes.
Maximum of 1.
Maximum.
Max. So Canterbury sends 20,
82.
pardon?
82.
82 total, and we send almost
130.
20 to 31.
It's more or less considered like the Senate versus the House of Representatives. Where everybody has a voice and it's all equal versus how many, what the population is.
Has the Board of Ed considered other designated high schools at all?
We've received proposals from 3, and it was something that was brought up at our community participation forum. Wasn't very well attended. The community participation subcommittee is going to be talking about sending a survey out. We get greater response from something like that regarding high school. We have to actually figure out how we're going to formulate those questions and to try to get feedback from there as well. Depending on that and several other things that we need to talk about as a board, maybe we will have those schools come in and present to us, as well as Woodstock Academy, to talk about what those other districts have to offer. The intention is not to pull any of our students from Woodstock Academy as an option.
That are currently going, but
Or future. I don't foresee us not having Woodstock Academy as an option for our students to attend. We just may have other options for them as well. But we need to go through that process and do our due diligence before we make a decision like that.
and I'm certain you're continuing to look at some of the less expensive options that you currently have, whether it's QMC or LS Tech or?
I know that there has been greater emphasis, just to educate the students on the options that are out there, such as Killingly VOAG, Ellis Tech, just to make them aware of it. The 7th and 8th graders have done tours. 7th grade usually goes to Ellis now, so they have an opportunity to learn about the school, because Ellis does put an emphasis on a 7th grade grades, because it is not just I want to go to Ellis so I can go, you have to be accepted. And I know that they have also toured Killingly VOAG, and they have the option to go see QMC as well as the charter school and the magnet school in Wyndham.
Excellent. And your 7th grade programs make so much sense, because that's when they're really making the decisions. You know, to give them all that information early enough that they can decide that's what they want to do.
The 7th grade is going to Ellis right now. They go to the Killingly VOAG early in their 8th grade year, as well as go to the academy where they were there as well.
There's nothing you can do as far as the representation. That's just the way it is. And
You had to be a corporator of Woodstock Academy, and they have specific criteria to meet that. And if you weren't, then you don't vote.
and how many corporators are there?
It's anybody who has graduated from Woodstock Academy and at least gone to school there for a year. So there's thousands. But how many people attended was probably 50?
50 or 60.
And the vast majority were the Board of Trustees. And the vast majority were were trustees,
And there's 30-some trustee members?
30 trustees. But there's 30 seats. I
There's
don't
30
think
seats. I think
they're all
there's,
filled
I
though.
think there's 22 trustees, right?
Thank you.
Victor, I don't know if you're the person, Frank Olin, I don't know if you're the person who would answer this, or the issue is in terms of the number of dollars of increase of the tuition relative to the projections a couple of years ago, was that there would be a 200 student occupying the campus here in the South as resident students, mostly from China, obviously from other countries. Has that goal been met, or is there a shortfall there so that the costs of that infrastructure needs to be addressed at some point by Chris as the head of school, and causing some of this $500, let's put it $1,000 increase for projection for next year? Do we have a shortfall of numbers of students?
I'll refer to Hans.
I would say it was a shortfall. In fact, they actually had some surprises that were in the plus for them at the start of the school year. But there's no doubt that the international students coming in is a huge benefit to them, which basically subsidizes our tuition costs. So if you want to look at our tuition, and hopefully it's not going up very much, you would think that they could actually get more international students. But they're having a hard time right now with Asian students, particularly Chinese students, because they're scared to come here. They were having a hard time in the beginning of this year because of the school shootings, and of course the relationships that we're having with China as a country. All sorts of things was causing a problem for them to have students coming in. But they're trying different avenues, going into different parts of the world, maybe Latin America, but each one of those zones have different tuition dollars that they can charge. So that all then will impact their total and final dollar, which then would impact their total operating costs and everything else that they can have as far as revenue, which then would affect our tuition dollars too. So that's still all being formulated. Probably be more involved after December, I think, when they'll have to start having more numbers for the following year. That big situation though with the CIAC, the NEPSAC athletic situation that they had, does cause a slight wrinkle in how they can maybe bring in international students, and that still has to be resolved. And it's still an ongoing, situation that will have some kind of impact one way or the other.
Thank you for the clarification.
Hans, I had some informal discussions with Chris in the past about possibly relocating his dining hall. It's adjacent,
Yep.
across the street. Is there any piece of the capital plan which envisions that happening?
I haven't seen that at all, but I actually did get some kind of plan in my emails just this week, so it must be there.
Okay.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Another question, are they, this is only $500,000 a year. $500 a student for the capital projects. So is this a bond, are these projects being bonded? And this is gonna fund a long-term thing?
That I'm not exactly sure. Like I said, they're still discussing how they're gonna work out the whole thing. They've had a capital plan in place for some years, but they haven't really gone through and implemented anything. Some of it had to do with timing-wise with students and summer school projects and things of that nature. The other aspect was what they were going to do with the South Campus too, because that also brings in a whole bunch of other capital improvements that they have to come up with. So that all being formulated and getting substantiated this year is now they're discussing other ways of offsetting those costs. And some of them were solar panels and having a company come in and do research on how much that would offset the cost. And they had different scenarios that we didn't even get to present to the trustees yet. So it was something that was discussed in the early forms of the executive committee. And that's basically all it is to talk about as far as that.
Yeah, it sounds like when you're talking about these are multi-million-dollar projects, not $100,000 projects.
Well, I think the total was $700 and some odd thousand dollars if you went with certain
That's all?
projects. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that answers the question.
Anything else? Yeah, I have a question. The health insurance, you went to the state partnership. Normally, the district goes to the state partnership because it's a more efficient or at least less expensive option than typical cares and all the other things we use. But you said that there's an 8 to 10% increase. What is the 8 to 10% increase of? What's the base from which that is? I mean, I thought we were self-insured. We stopped that. We went to the state. If I went to the state, it would be cheaper for me in the short term. So what's the 8 to 10% increase?
Well, in trying to plan for the budget, what was the potential increase that the premium was going to have for next year? So when I had that preliminary discussion with the insurance carrier, what happened last year was that 31 new districts or entities came into the partnership. So their history of a 5% increase every year, 4.5, 5, 4.9, was now skewed because there's 31 new members, which we don't know what their rating is. So the increase went to 8% in anticipation of that. So the historical data that I can gather as far as what our increase is going to be, because we're in the partnership, is kind of convoluted right now because they don't know, because we're only 5 months into this plan. They don't know what our history is. They don't know what the 30 other towns that were involved in the coming into the plan are. So that's why it's still very preliminary as far as what they're anticipating the increase. It could very well be that it's back down to 5% because there's now a huge amount of people that are going to be involved. But right now,
So the 8% is off what we would have paid on our current.
Right.
And then your 185,000 increase in teacher costs, are you holding your staff stable, and that's the negotiated increase for the current staff for next year? Right. So you're not anticipating any new teachers within that $185,000 increase, okay?
Anything else?
I think they were the answer from us about health insurance, whether or not we could use the internal service fund to help offset those increases.
Can I speak about that really quick? Our auditors are coming in on December 11th to talk about our financial the Internal Service Fund 10-222 violation because after the last episode, back in June, we had some legal advice, we had some auditor opinions. We really haven't discussed it at a meeting, but I think there might be some new insight, so I would request that you hold off on that until you hear from our auditors and see what our fund balance is, and then let them guide you as to where to go with that internal service fund. Because I think that there's a couple different issues there, and it would be best to come from them first. So we are all in, we go with our policy. There's been a lot of issues with that, so I would say that before you make a decision, you should wait and see what the auditors say when they come out in December to do our, their presentation of our financial statements.
There's also a difference between an internal service fund and the health insurance fund, kind of two different animals.
Well, the internal service fund is for a self-insured policy, which we no longer have. So we have to keep that open until all the runouts from this last fiscal year, June, whatever claims that they had when they were self-insured. But a traditional plan usually means that once it's done, it has to be closed out. When we had talked, you, myself, Karen, and the auditor, they were talking about leaving it open in case for a few years you decide that this Connecticut Partnership Program doesn't pan out. You may want to go back to self-insured. There might be money left in the reserve.
Right.
So that's why I think that it's important to talk to the auditors and get, so we're all on the same page, because I think all of us will be there together when they come out and see what they say at that point, so we all know where this is going.
I'd suggest that if we can, that the town attorney be there at the same time, because the issue is going to almost immediately jump to, this isn't an accounting issue, this is a legal issue, and we'll just end up sitting there going around in circles.
So this information is going to be available in December meeting?
I asked the auditors, because it's been an ongoing issue, we have a couple different opinions. One auditor is no longer with Mahoney Sable, she left. So now the new person, Mike, that is in charge, has another opinion. So I think that I had explained to him that this was an ongoing issue, that maybe we should talk about it when all the members are together. So that way everybody can ask their questions, see where we're supposed to go, and, you know, maybe having a legal opinion when everybody's in together. I don't know, but I would not make a decision as far as.
Well, we can't make any decisions tonight.
Right.
It's not part of the process tonight, but I know that there was a suggestion that perhaps we could give them some guidance. So thank you, but December
11th, 7 o'clock at the town hall is your next Board of Finance meeting, and that is when the auditors should be there to present the financial statements.
perhaps Mrs. Thurlow could be there. And anybody else from the board of ed, obviously. Victor, or.
But they're not those things, because they're usually talking about some of the funds that I'm under control of, so I usually go to those.
Very good.
We also look forward to the board continuing to have a voice in the discussion. So as things are happening behind the scenes and discussions with auditors and emails and messages being passed around, that the board's voice is also included before any sort of conclusion is.
Anything else from the board, Nick?
We did have a question. Cindy actually just brought this to attention. It's something that the Board of Ed has talked about on and off for a few years now, different potential revenue streams for the board. At one point, we had talked about charging for preschool. We had earlier this year invited another town to send their students to Woodstock as well.
suggested it had to be declared as part of the budget. Don't you have a page in the back? I meant to read it tonight, I forgot it. Where you talk about monies that comes from PTO, for example, and
Or the
fundraisers.
WEF or any other.
WEF, all that stuff. My recollection of this was that it has to be on that page. Do you remember, David?
Yeah, it's
It's not a
little-
violation if it's there.
It's a little more complicated than
Yeah,
that.
this is
because,
essentially grants. This would be tuition revenue.
Right, yeah, the problem was at the time, and would continue to be that we have for years spent to the limit. And so additional funds can't be allocated because we're already spending at the limit. What Dave is suggesting would have been that some of the revenues would include the tuition funds, which would give us more revenues. But that doesn't necessarily change, no, it wouldn't change the cap at the time. Now, going forward, if it was ahead of time, I don't know how that might affect the Prop 46 calculation, because that includes changes in revenue, right? Oh, it doesn't. No,
When
no.
we estimate the revenues on our end, we don't take into consideration any of the Board of Ed revenues. That, we take into consideration state grants and that kind of stuff.
So if we were able to budget it, it may work in advance, you could have it in your revenue side budget.
We could,
That might work out with the revenue would be available.
Yeah, yeah, the only problem with that is
but it stays, I think it
that's
stays.
not the way it's worded. The way it's worded is increases in state and federal grants and increases in grant list revenues. That's what it says specifically.
Right.
Which would exclude that. That's why I was just trying to run that through my head. I mean, it's a lot more complicated than just.
So I guess if that would be the case, and it's certainly not a board decision, just an initial, it's almost not worth it for us to look at potential other revenue streams or to try to do any sort of future partnerships with other towns or something because of the way we're structured.
I wouldn't say.
I wouldn't stop looking at it yet.
No.
I'm not stopping, I would just like to.
Then why would you do it?
Well, I know
Yeah.
that, but I don't know if that's true. Do we not have teachers bring their students here from other towns? That's what it was about. We had teachers.
Yeah.
$2,000 fee, we would charge teachers from other towns to bring their students to Woodstock.
We charge 50%.
Whatever it was. Do we have, I thought we had something.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so we do have something similar to that. Do we, in
We
effect,
had
now?
legal opinion on
I thought we did.
this.
And I don't remember what it was. I forgot.
Yeah. I think it's two years ago.
So just for the record, we will soon have a new town council, so perhaps this is something.
Something that
a
should
new
be
set of
discussed.
Eyes look at this, and, you know, we've been very impressed, in terms of the services of Attorney Rich Roberts of Allen and Sage. He's got a wide breadth of experience, you know, went to Woodstock Academy, still has connections locally, understands Prop 46 very well and very much in depth, and has a great background in municipal finance. So, you know, he is a resource that, you know, we will have available to the Board of Ed, Board of Finance.
Other schools charge for this. So they're already doing that, so there's got to be some sort of rules.
Other schools and other towns don't have proposition.
So the Board of Ed recognizes that that something has to be done, that things have to change somehow. You know, Mr. Boyd has been great with continuing updating as far as things on the state level. I monitor different, you know, bills that are proposed as much as I can. But we'd like to at least be able to maintain what we have, and it would like to figure out a way to do that, even if it's incrementally, to structure ourselves to be able to take these steps. But before we start taking this action, we'd like to know, is it possible, and that we have also the support of selectmen.
Well, I think as Mr. Albert said, I think as soon as we get the new attorney on board, that's something to discuss with him, what the possible venue, that we could proceed with, because unfortunately, as Mr. Richardson pointed out, and I just said, it's, Prop 46 is still the cap, and we can't exceed that. So it doesn't matter how much other income we bring in, we can't spend it. It is what it is.
But we do have a legal opinion. How do we get our hands on that? It's a year or two old, maybe
I
2
think we
years.
need an update.
And was it longer than that? Not much, though. All right, well, we have a legal opinion concerning this half-price tuition. I know.
Or was it Board of Ed? Remember? 'Cause I mean, I can go back, I keep a folder from years of all legal opinions and any attorney. I can start digging through to see if I can come up with something. But I don't know if it was our attorney or if it was.
I don't remember.
I couldn't get an updated one.
Well,
I think
certainly,
you would
but I'm
have
saying-
to.
But I'm saying as a baseline, we have one to start with, we can at least look at.
Yeah,
And certainly
we give
still get
history,
it.
at
But we're
least.
not even comparing the same two things. And we were talking before about bringing in students who were children of teachers. We were talking about a small number of students, and we were talking about a small fund that we were going to put listed separately, just like the other funds that you bring in and you list. But to bring in, like, say, the town of Eastford, for them to send all their elementary school children here, that's going to be quite a difference in the budget. So, I mean.
But the fundamental principle is the same, whether it's $10 or $10 million.
It may not be. It
I
may
mean,
not be.
if we're comparing, if we're talking about limitations of Prop 46, if that's what this is all about, I don't think the number matters. I know that there is a legal opinion that says they could charge half-price tuition for students of faculty, I don't know.
But this is another issue. This is now charging tuition for residents to
Residents
go
of
to
another
preschool
community.
or having another community come in and join our school system like
That's-
Eastford.
It's a
And
total.
they're gonna pay us tuition.
It's an attorney's judgment.
Yeah.
We can discuss it for hours.
Yeah, we need an attorney.
I think that's something we should
Yeah, and just say, that, well, this is all pure
get stuff out there.
discussion. It's, nothing is set in stone. The town of Eastern had a community meeting, and right now they are as they are. So it's not like, I just want people to know, it's not like we're gonna have a bunch of Eastern students joining us in the fall.
You can't.
So,
Aren't there legal,
oh,
aren't there legal issues of bringing students from another town into a public school? Aren't there state regulations about that?
no, I mean, Pat, you can.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
there's,
better
it
than I
happens in a number of places across the state.
Don't they- I mean, you have to, there has to be some.
They all have, the ones I'm aware of, because, and I do represent Eastford, and they've had a lot of discussions about, where they want to go in the future. They filled the gym with about 150 residents having a really good community discussion about 3 weeks ago. And there's basically a contractual agreement with another school district to provide those services, and there's an agreed upon figure, but my understanding was.
I don't know why that couldn't be set up outside the budget somehow.
According to a informational meeting that, I don't know if it was CAVE or CCI, I can't remember which, one of those. There's a couple different ways to structure it. We would just have, if we were going to proceed with it, we would have to figure out which way would best fit Woodstock and whatever other community we were going to be working with. I think one of them is a regional school district, one of them is just allowing students to pay tuition to come to our schools, and we either have some sort of written contract with them, but it's not a regional school district, because that brings a whole nother
See, I'm
level of
wondering if we
regulation.
can put on, it's not, I mean, I'm just kind of thinking about my revenue sheet, I wish I had it here in front of me, but basically, what it comes down to is we present the budget, and when the budget passes, we have to fund this budget. So I can't see why we can't list the revenues. I don't think it affects Prop 46. Prop 46 is only increases in spending, increases in state, if there's judgments against the town, those kind of things to give us a specific amount what we can spend.
But it does in fact put a limit on how much the budget can increase. So if you have all these additional students coming, you're gonna have additional teachers, you're gonna have additional expenses, so the budget's going to go up.
But I still think that we may be able to include that on our revenue sheet.
You can include it on the revenue sheet, but.
No, I know what you're saying.
But
We
it's
can only
not, it's
spend
not
so
gonna,
much. It does, I
it's
get
not
that,
gonna
I get
circumvent the
that.
Proposition 46 issue.
But even if you start in a smaller scale, say we charge for, having people pay for preschool like most other towns do. So in that case, we're not causing additional anything, we're just generating revenue.
Right, that would be,
But that's still not,
if
right now,
that
we're not
were
sure that's
doable.
viable.
If that's all you can do is generate revenue, it'd be great. We'll make a few more ideas like that.
But that won't change the teachers that are already there providing the free education for the preschool.
Correct.
So those, say those 20 or 30 kids that are going to preschool right now on the lottery, now you're charging them a tuition. It's not gonna change the expense to educate them because we're
Right.
already paying, so I mean, in that scale, I don't see why we couldn't do something like that.
You
I
can
mean,
offset, you can offset the costs.
Right.
I mean, we still should get a legal opinion, and
Yes,
hopefully we
absolutely.
can have the attorney come in December, maybe we could put that on the agenda for a little bit of discussion.
Is there a reason why a preschool has to be within the confines of the public school system?
Well, we do have to provide the special education services for those students, so by doing the preschool program and having a reverse mainstream program, we're allowing not only the special ed students to be in it, but also 50% of those students would be regular education students. So we're obligated to provide that, and it's just a healthier way of providing it, essentially.
Yeah, I understand the special ed thing, but, I mean, well, as I pointed out, I think last year, I mean, you had, I don't remember the exact number, there were like 10 special ed kids and 30 regular ed kids in preschool, which is way more than what, you know, than the 50-50. If the preschool was able to fund itself, and the public school paid the preschool for the special ed, say, can you move it outside? Because that eliminates the problem. If you generate enough funding, but if you can't generate enough funding, then it's the taxpayers of Woodstock that are paying for it. In which case, I think that has to be made clear to the public anytime this issue is brought up, because they're doing the funding. I don't know, that is probably as clear as mud.
I think we're back to attorney opinion in
Yeah,
December.
I think that's the best option, is to
You know, be thinking about it.
come up with any questions we might have and be prepared to ask them. Anything else?
I think we're done with the education.
Okay. Thank you. Very good. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you very much.
Since education's about 80% of the budget,
Tell us what you
we're only gonna take about a quarter of the time.
Oh, that's good, that's good.
Of the time. Just some of the things that we highlighted are on the sheet. These are things that are ongoing or that we expect to be issues in the new fiscal year. One of the challenges over the last several years is that we've had no activity in terms of addressing significant bridge structural issues with our bridges in town. We have identified, and the state has identified, a number of our bridges that have significant weaknesses in them. It is highly likely, with a formal request to potentially finance as much as $2.5 million of initial bridge repairs and a phased approach. This would be phase one. A couple of these bridges have already qualified for the local bridge program. Several of the bridges, Pat, were approved for steep grants in the past, but steep grants come sometimes with special conditions, and sometimes bridges get over-engineered to meet those requirements, so we may not want to pursue those steep grants for those bridges, but we do need to address the bridges nonetheless. So we are working with CME to get the data to make the formal presentation. We expect that as a result of some changes within the town hall in terms of the hours and also the personnel who are serving in the town hall, the most important one, which I forgot to recognize, is Karen Fitzpatrick, our town treasurer. We have to make some continuing adjustments to several positions in the town, and we're making those minor tweaks, as the opportunities arise. So, for example, the town recently hired a new assessor, coupled with bringing in Emily Carlone as the assessor. We had looked at the responsibilities of the assistant to the assessor, and we increased the hours of that position by 3 hours a week. So there will be some adjustments that we expect that we need to make in the new fiscal year. Looking at our present zoning enforcement officer position, the individual that is serving in this position is really overtaxed with other responsibilities. So we think that what we should be looking to do is, in the new fiscal year, carve out potentially a 12-hour zoning enforcement officer position and make sure that the proper staffing is available in the building office. We do have an ASME increase for unionized staff this year of 2.5%. We're contractually required to provide that. There were no increases for elected staff in the past fiscal year, so we will be making recommendations to provide increases there. We have higher transfer station fees that have been assessed to the town as a result of problems with recycling initiatives across the state. The state does a lot to mandate certain recycling programs, but the reality is right now the markets for many of these products just don't exist. So as a result, hauling fees are much higher. I brought it to the Board of Finance's attention most recently, but the DeVivo brothers of Willimantic Waste made member communities in Mequon aware that trash is being hauled as far away as Ohio. Markets have collapsed for many recyclables, and as a result, where towns once received some revenue, they're actually paying to have materials transferred out. So we have already seen much higher expenses, and I think, what was our estimate for the year that we were looking at?
As far as an overage?
Yeah.
About 20,000.
So maybe $20,000 of additional expense than what had been budgeted. So that's the reality. This is not going away. This will be in place for several years, according to the DeVos. On the positive side, the Board of Selectmen has gone forward and approved permit increases for transfer station fees that will go in effect in January. So we believe those will help offset those transfer station expenses. The building official has told us that he believes our building permit fees are too inexpensive, that we should readjust those. So we will be looking at those as well to see if that is in order. Earlier today, I heard our state representative on the radio, not in very flattering terms, I might add, in terms of the topic that you were discussing. But
We never are.
the couple of dispatch centers in Connecticut are at risk apparently because of the formula that's being used to try to sort out and make dispatch centers whole for their expenses in the past, as I understand
Yeah,
it.
it's the E911 fee that comes off phone bills right now, and regional dispatch centers are subsidized across the state, and they were subsidized to the point of encouraging cooperation amongst towns. And if you look at a map, you know, the northeastern Connecticut's got a couple really big regional ones, and then Fairfield County is every individual town doing their own thing. And so there's an agency proposal out of DESP to change that formula, which would not incentivize regional cooperation anymore, which is silly. And they've put it out for the first draft of what is a long process of regulation review. You know, if it were to go into effect, you know, it would come down to like a 250% increase, and I'm not sure what Woodstock's contribution is to QV right now.
I think it's about, yeah, 17,000.
So, you know, do the math, that would be put back. The one piece that doesn't make this necessarily an immediate issue is there is a hold them flat. They're not going to reduce their expenses in this proposal and decrease their subsidy, but they'll never, ever, ever have an opportunity to increase it based off the formula. So as the cost of doing business goes on in the future, so, you know, we're, as a delegation to the legislature, we put some testimony in today, and we're hoping to stave that off. But
So the 250% increase sort of resonated in my brain. So we talked about 7% being an expensive increase, 250%.
The state operates on a different
All that, yeah. We're going to continue to seek efficiencies. We did just recently open up bids for legal services at our last selectmen's meeting. Essentially, Halloran and Sage is going to them will save us about $50 an hour in terms of legal services. They were the low bidder, and the board is going to approve them subject to the records checks, which have been completed. It's highly likely that because of ongoing environmental issues, we'll continue to use the present firm for some of those issues if we can keep the cost relative down, because a lot of work has already been done, in terms of those services. We've expedited, Karen has expedited invoice processing in her office. That's freed up the assistant at least several hours a week. We are going to an electronic time management system, which I almost feel kind of sad to say that we're doing this because we have manual time cards right now, and that just, there's no need for that. We need to move on to the 20th century before we get to the 21st. We are now members of CCM, so CCM has provided us with unbelievable access to information which we never had in the past. So we're taking advantage of this. We're taking advantage of training opportunities, and it's been a phenomenal resource for us. One of the things that Frank brought up to us, and we are working on it, it's actually partly due to CCM, is we need to continue to work on position descriptions for our non-elected employees. We have some of that information already from CCM, but we need to continue to make progress. One of the most important things, I saved the best for last, is how do we make our town a more attractive, business-friendly environment for farming and non-farming employers. We, as a board, all three selectmen met with the Woodstock Agricultural Commission. We expressed our desire to try to find ways to be innovative and to be supportive of efforts to help encourage farming in all of its many, variations in town. But, the recent announcement from Crabtree and Evelyn and the loss of more than 100 jobs, gives us pause that we're not a very business-friendly community. We have many regulations which actually, work against businesses. We have people who move to town because they love the rural, bucolic environment, and then they don't want to see any changes to the town once they're here. I have every confidence that many of those employees that are going to lose their job will find replacement jobs somewhere. Those would be the base employees. I think that the employees employees at a higher level, a managerial or creative level, might have a more difficult time finding employment locally. We did ask our assessor, newly appointed assessor, to come up with the impact and of what this means, and you should all have a copy of her, her analysis of what we will see. Eventually, beginning in July 2020, the town will no longer be collecting personal property taxes from the company, and that amount we expect to be about $88,000 per year. We have reached out already. I've reached out to the Chamber of Commerce president. I've talked to one of the staff members, the outreach staff members for Congressman Courtney's office. And wearing my other hat as the senior commercial lender of my bank, I'm aware of certain businesses that may be relocating or trying to make some adjustments. So we will do our best there, but there aren't really a lot of businesses, 100 employees or more, that are knocking down the doors to come to rural environments like ours, where we don't have a transportation hub. We don't have a downtown business district. We don't have a lot of access to some of the things that businesses want. So, so those are some of the issues that we have. We have a whole myriad of day-to-day tactical issues which we're addressing as well, which we won't go into, right now. But we realize that Prop 46 is a governor on us. We have met, Frank and I met with individuals in West Woodstock maybe 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago. We met with people who, they would like to see us explore a resident state trooper. So on the face of it, when you think of a resident state trooper, and we've talked about it in the past, a resident state trooper is only available to the community 40 hours a week, and there are 168 hours in a week. But these people are, very discouraged by the statistics in terms of what's happening in their particular lake district, and they would like to see us explore it. Now, when you look at the dollars of what it costs, the estimates that we were receiving from the state troopers who came and made their presentations suggested that it could be as great as $225,000. When we got figures from CCM, it was even greater than that in terms of potential costs. So, we know that. We know that we are also living in a time and an environment where volunteerism is declining. We just got another resignation from one of our local boards today. So people are deciding for whatever reason to pull back. We've talked very candidly with our fire departments, Frank, Chan, and I, about the impact of volunteerism at the fire department level. And some of the best guesses are that we're maybe 5 to 10 years away from having to address some type of paid fire component. So these are major issues that, we're sort of skirting, but certainly are impacted by Prop 46 and the limits of it. But, there is this constant thread that there are many people that are personally concerned about their security. I issue personally as many as 5 pistol permits a week as your first selectman. We are very well armed in Woodstock. So, it just never ceases to amaze me. I'm running out of badges to deputize. So that is it from our perspective. I don't know, Frank, if you want to add anything from the.
Well, I think the health and safety issues and fire department all really talk very concretely about how we can afford, state trooper, paid fire department. Indeed, and even not a paid fire department, but a few people who could actually drive the trucks, get to a scene so that in case there is a major house fire, that there are enough people in there on the scene so that they are able to at least get the right people into the building, if they have to do building rescues and very difficult for some of our departments to have enough people on call to get there at that scene. So the Board of Selectmen have really looked at that issue. We're still looking at that issue. There's no answer to the issue, but we're really trying to help that piece. That's a huge and concerning piece that I think we have as 5 years down the road we're going to have to address.
One thing that I would address also, would not be responsible for me not to say that there's so many positive things too. So we are partnering with Woodstock Academy in terms of exploring the use of the tennis courts that are right over here. The Academy has asked us to help them provide access to those courts. So we have a draft agreement between the Academy and the Town Recreation Department that we are sending over to Rich Roberts for review. We don't want to make it a lease type operation, but we want to make it a working operating agreement where the Academy would help provide funding to upgrade these courts, and it would be a resource not only for Academy students, but also for the community as well. So
Just make sure they don't tack that onto the tuition.
To the $500.
I'll do my best.
All right.
I'll do my best. So that's it. I'll take any questions.
I had a quick one as far as Crabtree. Does the town receive any state grants as far as the equipment and manufacturing for Crabtree as well, or is it?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
So it's just personal real property that?
Yeah, personal real property. I mean, what will happen is when they sell the property, assuming they sell it, someone else will pick up that cost. I mean, we've heard some speculation that Crabtree is also going to downsize their managerial operations here
Yep.
too, so that, there may be other positions down the road that are gonna come, so. And the rationale that they've given in all of their releases is, this, it really reflects the trend towards e-commerce, and they need to outsource production and distribution to someplace that's cheaper because it's cheaper.
Any other questions for the selectmen? No. All right. Board of Finance. Anybody have anything that we'd like to add at this time? Michael? David?
Certainly no shortage of challenges. I think we can all see that. Just want to probably reiterate that last year, the selectmen were able to cut their budget, I believe it was nearly $200,000. We didn't reduce the budget to the taxpayers. We rolled that money, ended up being rediverted to the Board of Ed, plus 100% of what we were allowed under Prop 46. I personally can't see how we're going to be able to do that again. Not saying we wouldn't, but I just can't see it happening 2 years in a row. Just a point for consideration. So we should be thinking about where we're forming our budgets.
Good.
No, nothing really.
David?
I think almost everything we heard tonight is need for more money. And there were a number of things said about Prop 46 capping spending. If you look back over the last 4, 5, 6 years, Prop 46 allowed for fairly significant tax increases. If there's an idea that somehow we need to have tax increases that are going to be 4, 5, 6% a year, and that's kind of what I heard. We got to do this, we got to do that, we got to grow this, we got to grow that. The problem's not going to be Prop 46. We're going to be back to where we were in 2009, 10, 11, where budgets just, taxpayers are going to say enough's enough. There is a limit to how much can be put on them. So I think the plans have to be in line with reality. So, tough. It's it's a tough area right now. Woodstock's better off than a lot of towns around us. But things aren't growing. So, you know, even the enrollment in the school, you're down over 5% next year in enrollment. We can't be talking about enrollment declining. It's down over 20% where it used to be. And expanding staff. Bridges are pretty hard to get around when you can't get down the road. But some of these other things, it's going to get tough. And nobody in this room has a clue what the state's going to do. The state doesn't have a clue what they're going to do. But I'm pretty sure that Hartford, New Haven, and Bridgeport are going to be a whole lot higher on the pecking order than Woodstock is in terms of receiving. So, my only comment.
Jeff? Glenn?
I'd like to thank both boards for bringing forth their reasonable ideas. And hearing from the Board of Ed, the only increase I really heard was from the Academy. And thank you to the Board of Selectmen for telling us that we need bridges and maybe a resident state trooper, fund the fire department. So even though I hear what Mr. Richardson's saying about Prop 46 and being limited, and about taxpayers not wanting to have to pay for all this, it's the same taxpayers that we're trying to present these services, that are asking for these services, that I'm sure want bridges that they can cross every day to get to work, and they want security. They want to make sure that they don't necessarily have to have a handgun underneath your pillow to be protected at night. So I think, you know, you make a good point, but at the same time, it's those people that we're trying to provide the services to. And I think if we present them reasonable information, that they may very well decide that it's something that they want and reasonable. And thanks to both boards for sharing with us, particularly at this point when we're just trying to dialogue what you see the future be. So thank you.
I'd like to echo that. Thank you to both boards as well. I think, you know, some of us might have heard some information that they, up until this point in time, had no idea about. Plus, there's a lot of new things that are coming up. There's going to be a lot of new challenges down the road here. That's what we all have to work on together, work with. I want to thank Pat Boyd for being here. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
We'll know more in January.
We'll be looking forward to hearing from you.
And Mike, just on a final note, I'll work with Kenny Roberts to get him here for December 11th.
Excellent. Very good. Any other comments from the public?
Just a comment that, you know, our school population, your K through 8, peaked in 2003. And the population of the academy peaked in 2005, 2006. But your employment peaked well after that. And, you know, my point to you guys is I'm not sure I can always understand what's being told to be as the truth. Because, you know, you just keep on, you know, saying that the sky is falling. And you haven't decided to size your school to the number of students you have. And for me, I have a great fear of bringing like Eastford in here, because that would just make that soup even boil more, because I as a Woodstock taxpayer wouldn't know if I was subsidizing Eastford. You know, and then your superintendent has numbers that K through 8 cost. I think you said $9,500. Is that a close number? 95, 98 was cost?
A little bit less.
Well, you know, if you take the total budget, which is $18,194,000, and divide it by the number of students, the average over the whole system, cost per student is $14,236. So if Woodstock Academy charges you $13,800, you know, how do you get 98? I mean, if there's something in this budget that wouldn't go against the student that should be in the highway department, maybe we need to get it over there. But it looks like your average cost K through 12 is $14,236. So maybe you can enlighten me to understand this $9,500 number. But basically, K through 8 since 2003 is down 16% in students, and the academy is down 9.5. Those are the kind of answers I'd like.
Well, I don't think this is the time to address that. If that's a question that you wish addressed, I think the best time for that would be at one of the Board of Ed's meetings.
Yeah, but you know, we've got 80% of the.
Or at a budget presentation meeting. Tonight was just to get dialogue going, leading up to the budget.
Agreed, but I think somebody at some point has to start sizing the school to the number of students that are there. You just can't be off in this dreamland. And with the state where they are, basically, if you look at what's returned to the general fund, we probably could say conservatively, we've been overtaxed by about $3 billion over the last few years. So it's
Anyone
something
else?
to think about.
No? Okay. I have no announcements or anything to make at this time, so motion for adjournment is in order.
Move to adjourn.
Mr. Lessig?
I'll second.
And Mr. Ford, the second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you all once again. Have a great night.